We had 8 teams in action today, three first-round series coming to an end, while Luka Doncic scored 42 points to give the Mavs an advantage over the Clippers and take the 3-2 lead in the series. Lots to talk about. Let's get started. We'll start off with the Sixers and the Wizards. The Sixers finally putting the Wizards to rest. Ben Simmons just shutting down the ghosts of his game 4, scoring some free throws as well, 5 out of 8, not too bad compared to what he had before. Tobias Harris got rid of his nightmarish shooting in game 4. So I think the Philadelphia 76ers overall had a nightmarish game in game 4.
Yeah.
All of them put to rest. Tobias Harris had a great night. Seth Curry went off, got 30 points himself. And then Ben Simmons actually played at center, small ball center. The Sixers are experimenting. Pretty comfortable victory. No surprises there. But Joel Embiid's status still remains uncertain for the next series. How dangerous is that going to be for the Sixers?
Oh, very. First of all, when I was saying it'll be interesting how Doc Rivers, who's been supporting Ben Simmons all year long and telling us how valuable he is, and I know that, I believe in that, but there were a lot of naysayers. Excuse me. So I thought it'll be interesting to see how he handles it, and I think he took it to the next level. Last season, Philadelphia played Simmons at the 4 in a bunch towards the end of the season, but this is another level. This is basically Doc Rivers looking at the league, saying, okay, we have point centers now. We have Jokic. We have a few others who are developing into this sort of player. So let's cash in. Maybe it works. This small ball center, because he's bigger than PJ Tucker, and Tucker played at center against AD people. So this should work, right? With his passing, with his inability to shoot and his size, he is a center actually. His game is that of a center, a point center. So it worked. That was great. That was great to see. The other standout stat from this match, which is something that might worry the Sixers, is they were garbage from 3. The only reason it didn't cost them is A, because it's the Wizards, and B, because it is the Wizards. They're the most garbage team from 3 in the league. Like, you remember we were looking at that 4-quarter graph of the x-axis was number of threes attempted and the y-axis was percentage 3 conversion. And the Wizards were bottom left max, like at the corner of the image, to the point where I thought it was a watermark. I had to actually look at it to know it's a logo. So that's going to be a problem, especially against the Hawks, which is whom these guys play. The Hawks are lethal from deep. It's going to take all of Ben Simmons' ability to try and contain Trae Young, which I think he should be able to do. But they still have a bunch of sharpshooters, the Hawks, right? So, and that's where Embiid comes in, because the Hawks are pretty strong on the interior. Capella has been a monster this season.
Right.
With Embiid, not too much of a problem, because Capella will have his hands full. Without Embiid, it's going to be a big ask. I think Dwight Howard's up for it if they want to play him there. If they want to play him and start him, then I think he's up for it. But it'll be a very interesting series against the Hawks. With Embiid, they're too strong for the Hawks. Without Embiid, this is a tough series. I would still ever so slightly favor Philadelphia, because more experience, because coaching. But the Hawks can make a meal of this series.
Of course, the Sixers are 10-11 without Embiid in the regular season, and now in the playoffs 1-1. It's going to be tough. They were outscored by 1 point whenever Embiid is off the court itself. Even when he's on the bench, they've been outscored. So that shows how much of a monster he's been in the rim. You can see it in the box scores, right? He gets you 35 points, 15 rebounds every single game. Obviously, he was one of the contenders for MVP. That was his impact. And to lose a player like that, for what? Like, this is the 3rd time in 4 years that they're losing, and last year they didn't have Ben Simmons. That's a sad story for Philadelphia. I mean, such a great player. It's just a shame to see him get injured at this pivotal time in the series. So I hope Embiid is back to make it a good series. I wouldn't discount the Hawks. The way they've been playing, they've raised the game to an entirely different level. Knocked out the Knicks today. Trae Young getting 36 points. He was not at his best, but still 36 points, even when he's not at his best, shows his class.
Right.
And then a message to the MSG where he bore down like a Broadway performer. And it's class. I mean, this draft of 2018 is going places, isn't it? I mean, aren't they? Because Trae Young, Luka Doncic, Ayton, Michael Porter Jr., all of them balling out, all of them getting great games, all of them performing, shining, even in the playoffs. Great to see. The Hawks, though, I mean, they're 27-11 since the change of coach. And honestly, I underestimated them. I thought the Knicks would really go past them. Even though it would have been a 6 or 7 game series, I thought the Knicks would win. But the Hawks easily went past the Knicks. I mean, the Knicks Great season for them. Unfortunate end. The Hawks are a team to watch out for. I don't think it'll be easy for the Sixers, even with Embiid on the floor.
I wonder who picked the Hawks to win against the next season.
You did. I got to give you that one. You did.
No, it's too much of offense for the Knicks to handle. That was simply what I was banking on. And the Knicks, whatever they did in the regular season was they banked heavily on Julius Randle's performance. Now, him tanking that I didn't see. Like he choked. He flat out choked the series. That I didn't expect. But outside of him, they had shooting troubles early on. Barrett was shooting brick after brick. Bullock wasn't great at the start of the season. He picked up much later. And they didn't have Derrick Rose for a good chunk of the season.
Right.
Rose came in much later, right? So this team had its own share of problems, but they rode high on the coattails of Julius Randle's MIP performance and their defense. Now that was the hallmark of all of their success. And I thought that defense, as good as it is not going to be able to hold down Atlanta's offense because they can hurt you inside and out. With Capella, that was such a genius move for them and disastrous for the Rockets to acquire Clint Capella, because Trae Young in a pick and roll with Capella is dangerous. That gives them so many more options, especially once they start running staggered screens and all the stuff that you usually see Utah do, that Atlanta are doing more and more of. So he's learning from his seniors, looks like. And that's kind of why I picked the Hawks. And that's why I say the Hawks will be a handful for Philadelphia. Even with Embiid on the floor, I think Hawks offense will be a handful. But I think with Embiid on the floor, Philly can always outscore the Hawks. They can always put points up. They space the floor possibly even better than the Hawks can, because with Embiid, very often you'll see him float to the perimeter. And what are you going to do? Capella has to follow him. Nobody else can kind of even hope to compete with Embiid. And that creates all kinds of nightmare scenarios, especially if Embiid's the one setting screens in a pick and roll. That really exposes Capella, because if he switches, that's a problem, because then he's now on some shooter or Ben Simmons, who will easily go past him, though he can't shoot. And if he doesn't switch, Embiid's good enough to drain a few threes every now and then. So Embiid creates a lot of problems on offense. Even more than what he can perform on defense. So I think with Embiid, it's too much for the Hawks to overcome. I still respect them enough to say it might even go to 6 games. But without Embiid, slight favorites Philadelphia, but this series could go either way.
Great season for the Hawks. They're reaching the second round after 5 years, where in 2016 they had Mike Budenholzer as the coach, and the team was built around Al Horford, Paul Millsap.
Yeah.
That team doesn't exist anymore. It's entirely built around Trae Young, and boy, has he risen up to the occasion. But before we move on to the next game, I think we'll have to talk about the Knicks, because the Knicks had a great season regardless of how it ended. I think lots to look forward to for them. They ended 41-31. They got a few stars. RJ Barrett showed that he can stay in the league. He can be a player in the league. Julius Randle really rose to the occasion as well. Yeah, 4 bad games. That's all he had. Or 5 bad games. That's all he had. But I think he's a player to watch out for. Lots to look for the Knicks. They have a huge budget. They can go out and splurge and get a big player as well.
Well, it's free agency time. So I think they did great for themselves, in the sense that they've showcased this as one of the nicest opportunities for a star or a star in the making free agent to come and slot in as the face of the franchise. Because right now that's Julius Randle. There'll be plenty of stars that fancy themselves to be able to take over from Randle.
Right.
And everything else is in place. They have a great defense. They have a great set of young stars that are up and coming. They have cap space, so they can bring in the kind of role players and stars that they need to compete. And I'll have to check, but I think they have a couple of interesting draft picks coming up. So overall, they're well positioned. The biggest problem with the New York franchise was that the ownership would meddle and the front office was a mess.
Right.
Ownership can't really change that, but to a large extent, I think the front office issue has been fixed. They have people that the players respect. That's most important. It's a bit like Pelinka. They have people from PR and sports agencies and stuff. So that will give them some street cred, so to speak. They can land some interesting free agents should anyone turn up now, because it's also the biggest basketball market commercially and lifestyle wise. It is an attractive city. It's a big city market, and one that doesn't have a superstar right now. So you could really go build a brand there. Yeah, I think they've done great for themselves this year. This is a disappointing end to their season, but I think they're only getting started.
Talking about taking care of business, like the Sixers did, like the Hawks did, the Jazz came out there today to take care of business. They demolished Memphis Grizzlies. It was all over after first quarter. They took a
Yeah.
48-28 lead. And the Grizzlies, despite all their hustle and young blood and all of that, it was way too much for them. I mean, there was
Yeah.
no contest after that.
Yeah.
Donovan Mitchell went off, got 30 points for himself, 10 assists. Everyone contributed to this game. Gobert got 23, Clarkson got 24, Royce O'Neal got 17, Bojan got 17, and we've always talked about the depth of Utah Jazz, and it was all on display today.
Yeah, even when depth, especially because their shooting wasn't all that great. I mean, they put up the same 3 volume, they weren't just hitting as many.
Well, they got 8 of the first 10, and then the second half was just
they
like
fizzled out.
garbage time. So
Yeah. So, no, I'm saying, but overall, even then, even as wasteful as they were from there, because these guys almost half their shots are 3 attempts these days. So
yep.
it hurts them a lot when those don't go in. And they're still able to hurt them just because of the sheer spread of scoring. The number of people in, what was it, like 5 players that they had in double digits? Or was it 6? 5, I think it was. But very, very impressive. And what should be the most frightening thing about this Jazz team is because of the kind of options that they have on offense and the way they're able to distribute the load, they're also able to play with multiple play styles. So what you see in some other superstar driven teams, like with Lakers, what's the question always? What happens when LeBron's off the court? What happens when Luka sits? What happens when Trae Young is not driving the offense? The Jazz are affected. It's not like they're immune to their star player going off, going off the court. But given how many ways they score and just how distributed their playmaking is, regardless of who gets the assist, it's not one guy making genius plays all the time like it is with the Mavs.
Right.
It's team ball. It's off the ball movement. It's slashers and runs and set plays and screens and just fundamental basketball. So Donovan's off the court, somebody else is running the show. Clarkson's taking off. He can do ISO, he can run plays. Bogdanovich can do it. Conley had an off night and they still put up like 120 plus. So this team can hurt you multiple ways, and they're really showing off their entire range, which should put the Western Conference on notice. But it's a team without a quintessential superstar and not a glamour market. So I guess we're going to continue to sleep on the Jazz until they actually win the West if they do.
With that, I mean, things have been falling into place for them, right? I mean, Mavs and Clippers are fighting it out. That might as well go to 7. There's no home advantage there. No team is able to win at home. Luka Doncic went off and got 42 points. And before I get to that, things are falling in place. I mean, the Mavs and Clippers, whoever comes through, the Jazz will face them. But that'll be a tired and fatigued team. On the other end of the bracket, you might not even have LeBron and the Lakers there because they're just injured, and Phoenix Sun might just take care of business over there.
True.
And you might just end up facing the Phoenix Suns in the final. How it's a dream for the Jazz. I think that's a reward for finishing top in the regular season, and they're enjoying it.
I like how we've just written off Denver or Portland, whoever comes through to.
Well, it's the Phoenix Suns or the Denver or Portland, and whoever comes from there.
Yeah.
It's not the Lakers, it's not the Clippers. You're avoiding all of them.
Correct. No, unless they choke, the Jazz are poised to come out of the West as it stands. But the thing is, so many series are now so topsy-turvy. You don't know. You don't know what happens in that Mavs Clippers series and in what shape they get out. Whichever team gets out of it, are they coming out unscathed? Fatigue, I understand, but injuries, how's that going to look? But right now, as of today, the Jazz look best placed to come out of the East. Might change tomorrow, you never know. But for today, it's the Jazz.
And then moving on to the Staples Arena, where Luka Doncic put on yet another show. He's played all his playoff games, 11 of them, all against the Clippers. He averages around 40 points. He averages around 9 rebounds, averages around 10 assists. This again is one of the best teams in the Western Conference. He's not seen any other team in the playoffs. He might see them after this if he takes care of the Clippers in one more game. 42 points, 8 rebounds, 13 assists, 6 out of 11 from 3 was it? And single-handedly, I mean, you saw Dame Lillard put on a spectacle yesterday. This was something similar. And the only difference being this resulted in a win.
True.
I mean, you're running out of adjectives to describe this guy at this moment. Kawhi Leonard had one off day. He got 20 points. Paul George got 23. Reggie Jackson went off and got 20 points. But what's wrong with the Clippers? I mean, this is what I've been telling all season long, right? I mean, when it comes to clutch moments, they are clueless. They don't know what to do. They don't know who's calling the shots. All they know is you got to pass the ball into Kawhi's hands regardless of where he is and what position he is. And you saw him airball it today, which is very unlike Kawhi as well. But what this is the problem with Clippers. You don't have a leader, and this is how it
Yeah.
turns out.
Yeah, who's calling the shots on the floor? That's what I want to know. Who the hell is making decisions?
Batum.
It looks like it because look on that shot, Kawhi hit an air ball, sure, but it was a ridiculously tough shot, contested. He had no room to even turn around and shoot. There's only two players I can think of that make that shot more often than they miss it. Everyone knows the names. I'm not going to say it. Now, Kawhi, the thing is, of course, the ball went to Kawhi. Of course, he took that three. But here's the number of things that were wrong with that. A, there was no plan other than just get it to Kawhi. Which, okay, some players make that work, but the game has changed. The era has changed. It's not like you can do that Michael Jordan Kobe thing today. Defenses are smarter. They know how to create better angles. They know how to create better suffocation, avoid separation between the shooter and the defender. People are better prepared now. So you can't do this thing of you just catch the ball, turn around and shoot. It's going to be a very low percentage move. It didn't look like they had a plan. Just wherever Kawhi can wriggle free, just throw the ball to him, just turn around and shoot and hope for the best. That's not a plan. That's not a plan. People have elaborate set pieces for what to do if you need one shot to win the match or tie the game. That didn't look like any of that. That was just schoolyard bullshit. And that's just the last play. Forget that. Why did it come to that? The clutchest players, don't allow it to come down to the last play if they can help it. Why did it come down to that? When they're chasing down a lead, who's taking the lead? Is lead on the court? Is it consistently clear who gets the ball? Like Mavericks, whether they're chasing, whether they're in the lead, regardless of what scenario, if the Clippers miss a shot or whoever misses a shot, anyone on the Mavs gets a rebound. Who's the ball going to? That first pass, who's it going to? Everyone in the building knows who's getting the ball. I don't think it's clear with the Clippers. I don't think even if they get the ball, they have a plan as to what to do. They just look like they're just figuring out their offense on the fly as they go. And if they still think 1 year after whatever happened to them last year happened, that they can just wing it that damn good, no practice, no games together, just come and let it rip. They are pretty damn good. But that's a very risky strategy to employ. Kawhi had an off night today. Overall, he had an off night today. He was spending more time defending Luka. I don't know if that wore him down. I mean, I'll be shocked if a pro player of his level, one game defending from half court, the other team's best player, and you're worn down. But he had an off night. Nobody supported him. And it was just a disastrous performance. I really don't know what to say about this team. About Luka, two differences between him and Lillard's performance. One, he got the win. That's the most important. But also, Lillard held it all the way through into 2 overtimes, no less. Luka had a disastrous fourth quarter. It could have cost them the game. Scored 2. I thought he scored 0 until someone pointed out he scored 2.
And a couple of turnovers as well.
He had a completely off. I think good self-awareness though. He was the first to acknowledge it post-game.
Yes, he always does that.
Right. That was nice in the fourth quarter. Very similar to LeBron, whom I understand he idolizes, right? LeBron has almost a photographic memory of all the things that he did wrong, the other team did wrong and stuff. So it is eerily similar to that. But the team stepped up. The team that slept through 3 quarters. I mean, at one point at halftime, it was like 69 points for the Clippers, 36 or 39 in this game.
Boban was the second top scorer in that team at halftime.
Yeah. So good for him. They stepped up. And this is another level. The first 2 games, Luka was spectacular. But then Finney-Smith went off. They were getting shots in from all around the court. They were hitting threes, except Porzingis. Pretty much everyone stepped up in those. In those first 2 games, right? Hardaway hit some clutch shots, and they got through. And then game 3 and 4, all of them went disappearing. It was just down to Luka, and then the Clippers played well, so they lost. This game was a continuation of the support just not coming in, just not good enough. Porzingis, I don't even know if he's on the court half the time. It's that bad.
Yeah.
He's 7-3, so that's saying something. And yet they won. They found a way to win off of the back of another monster performance from Luka. And it doesn't look like he's tiring. This is supposedly an injured Luka with some nerve issue in his neck, no less. Yeah, be afraid, Western Conference. He's just getting started, just like the Knicks, but he's like 10 steps ahead.
Good that you mentioned Porzingis. What is wrong with him? He doesn't even get to 5 rebounds these days. Today he didn't even get to double-digit scoring. Boban had 9 and KP had 8. How bad is that for the Mavs? I don't even see him having a long-term future with the Mavs. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a little heartless, but they should trade him because this is another John Wall situation. A lot of talent, a lot of potential, injured all the time. How does it matter? Except with KP, it's a lot more dangerous because That's an unnatural size for a human.
Right.
Right? It's not normal for people to be of that size, and that size fails more often than not. You'd hear of a Shaq, you'd hear of a Giannis or a KD, but who remembers Greg Oden, who was on par with anyone else coming into the league, just fizzled out, never was fit to play.
Yep.
An unnatural size. That's why everyone's so worried about Zion. So with that come issues. Anthony Davis, growth spurt, 1 year just shot up by a foot, injury plagued ever since.
Yep.
So this could be a recurring thing, and I suspect either he's still struggling with an injury, Porzingis, or a lot of great players in the past have said this. There have been injuries, and major injuries. I'm talking at the level of Achilles and ACLs and stuff like that, where even if they did come back, it played on their mind.
Right.
Every time they make a move that led to the injury before, like a crossover or a spin or getting to a spot, they're hesitant to do it.
Right.
They're hesitant to take a leap to make that dunk because what if I land awkwardly again? It mentally it wears you down. Maybe it's that, but we're speculating. I don't think we're ever going to see a fully fit Porzingis for more than a season. Could be a hot take, but that's what data and history tells us with players that tall and that big. Mavs, if they're being cold-blooded and focused on building a championship team, they should trade him now because they still will get a ton of value.
Of course. Mav lead 3-2. No home win so far in this entire series. This hasn't happened since 1995, I think, when Houston Rockets and Spurs all won on the road, five games on the road. Would you pick the Clippers to make a comeback in this and take this to 7?
Maybe. I think that was the season that Houston Rockets came down from a 2-0 deficit.
Yep.
Right? Yeah.
Yep.
So history is kind of on the Clippers side, no? But what about that stat, right? Game 5's winner usually wins a 7-game series. Even if this does go to 7, maybe it'll go to 7. I mean, if the pattern's anything to go by, Game 6 is in Dallas, so Clippers should win. Maybe it'll go to Game 7. I trust the Clippers to be good enough at least to take it to Game 7. But neither do I want to bet against history that the Game 5 winners will go down in Game 7. Nor do I want to bet on the Clippers in a Game 7 ever until they prove that they can handle it. So I'm going with Mavs for the series. Can't really make a Game 6 prediction.
All right. So those were the games today. Another interesting Game 6 tomorrow. The Portland Trail Blazers taking on the Denver Nuggets and the Lakers and the Phoenix Suns. What are your picks for those games? Both of them, firecrackers. Both of them, I really don't know whom to pick in the Trailblazers and Nuggets because you see one team play and you're like, there's no way Denver's losing this. And then you see Lillard put up 40 points and Denver just crashing by 30 points in Game 4, was it? And then you see Portland play that way and you'll be like, there's no way they're losing this from here. And then they crash and they burn. So I really don't know what's going on in that series. It's fun to watch. There's no defense.
True. True.
What's your pick for that game?
Yeah, except when Denver crash and burn, it's usually because Lillard's gone off. And when Portland crash and burn, it's because everyone else except him has absolutely not gone off. Like, they've gone off the court. They've just given up and walked out. Like, what do you do when in the clutch final seconds of second overtime, you draw 3 defenders, give the ball to an open Covington, and he decides to get cute.
Oh, man.
The rim and he missed a dunk. He missed a dunk in a 3-point lead game. And then the very next play, McCollum gets the ball on the perimeter. He knows this because he took 3 steps back to receive that pass, so he's in position for a 3-point shot. He knows his feet are just squished in that gap between the baseline, between the touch sideline and the arc. What does he do? He does a step back fake before he dribbles forward. That step back is like a foot beyond the line. That's out of bounds. That's a turnover. 2 back-to-back turnovers, last minute of overtime, double overtime. What do you do? So going by all this, how much it takes for Portland to even contend in the series, I think this is now Denver's to lose. I would expect them to clinch it.
All right. And the Phoenix Suns and the Lakers, it's said that Anthony Davis is more probable to play than Chris Paul. And supposing Anthony Davis plays and he's say 60% fit, would you pick the Lakers?
Yeah. If he's playing, if he's even remotely fit, yes. Because he's playing for pride right now. I don't think there's going to be a lot of conservative approach in the game. LeBron's playing for pride. Two players of
and
that
survival.
caliber. Yeah, exactly. So also LeBron going out in the first round. Has that ever happened? I don't remember if it has. So
what are the odds that the referees will call Ayton for 3 fouls in the first 2 minutes and you got to bench him.
maybe. But no, I'm not too worried about it. Look, if AD's there, then that kind of takes care of it. But the only regret that I have, who knows, maybe Phoenix win this game, right? But the only regret that I have is, unlike Phoenix, where the atmosphere is so amazing because they have a capacity crowd, Staples doesn't. I don't think that.
Yeah.
I mean, you'll know the regulations better, but they don't have. They have a very limited crowd capacity.
Yep.
As we saw today in the Clippers game also. So that sucks because a game 6 survival game, excuse me, in a packed to the rafters Staples Center, that's a sight. That's quite a sight. But that's the only sad part. Look, I expect the Lakers to at least put up a fight. I don't know if I can say I expect anymore. I hope they put up a fight because it's not bad that they lost game 5. Most people were expecting them to. I think we picked the Suns as well.
Yep.
It was that they gave up in the first quarter. Right. Everyone not named LeBron James gave up in the first quarter. And then LeBron kind of gave up in the second quarter, which is like, what is happening? He walked off the court. He went into the locker room with like 3 or 4 minutes on the clock. That's pathetic. So put up a fight. You're going to go down with dignity and respect, and we'll say, okay, this was an injured season. But that was disgraceful. The way they played in game 5, the way the Clippers choked today, they should just shut down basketball in Los Angeles. They're a black mark on the sport right now.
All right, then lots to look forward to tomorrow. 2 fun games, and I'll catch up after tomorrow's games.
All right, man. Cheers.
See you.